Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. If you guys are new around here, my name is Divyanka and I'm a doctor of pharmacy here in the US. On this channel, I'm striving to provide both you and I with resources to live our best and most productive life. So today's video is actually a little bit different. I actually got invited to speak and give a presentation on regulatory writing and overall a career in industry by the UNC chapter of IPhO. Now, this meeting specifically was a collaboration between the UNC chapters of IPhO, SNPhA, and AMCP. So first of all, I'd like to thank those three organizations, especially IPhO at UNC School of Pharmacy, to invite me to give this presentation. It's incredibly important to know all the different career paths you can take as a PharmD, and so I really encourage knowledge and learning about any type of career path, even if it's something you don't think you'd be interested in. So kudos to all of the students who have reached out and who are interested in this topic to learn more about non-traditional roles in pharmacy. So the rest of this video is actually going to be my presentation that I actually gave the UNC IPhO, SNPhA, and AMC chapters, and I'm sharing this on my channel as a video because I think it's going to be helpful for you guys. I kind of went over my role, the role of medical writing, regulatory affairs, regulatory writing, etc. in this presentation. So for those of you who need it, I hope this is helpful. That's it for the intro, so let's just go right to the presentation.
Thank you again for everyone coming on to the second link. Today we have Dr. Divyanka Gupta. She graduated with her PharmD from MCPHS University in 2020, and she is currently a regulatory writer and works at Aura Inc. She's also pursuing her MBA in healthcare administration, and you can find her sharing her story on her YouTube channel, FocusRx. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you again, and I know there are technical difficulties, but hopefully I can kind of speed through it so we still have the same amount of time for questions at the end. So just to give you guys an overview today, thank you guys so much for inviting me to speak about what I do during the day, what I've done kind of during school, and I hope you guys can take away something from what I have to share today. So today, we're going to talk about a general overview of what regulatory writing is and the value of a PharmD in the pharmaceutical industry to begin with. So just have to put this in there. I don't have any affiliations. All the opinions that I share are my own. So today I'm going to go over who I am, my education and career pathway so far, careers within pharma and some things that you might not have heard about before, regulatory writing, the value of a PharmD in the pharma industry, and then I kind of want to dive into a fellowship versus entry-level positions and kind of highlight pros and cons between them. And then, of course, we'll leave some time for questions. All right, so I am a PharmD and I graduated last year in May from MCPHS University, which is in Boston. And right now I'm doing a part-time MBA in healthcare management, also from MCPHS. For my day job, I am a regulatory writer at Aura, which is a contract research organization. I wanted to say that because I'm going to come back to that word later, so definitely keep that in mind. And on the side, I do have a YouTube channel called FocusRx, and I talk about pharmacy, career-related tips, and a little bit of lifestyle. So if you guys are interested in that, definitely stop by. All right, so I wanted to highlight kind of the experiences I got outside of school during my pharmacy school years because I think they really shaped me up to be where I am right now. So in terms of the pharmacy program that I went to, it was a 6-year straight program. I didn't have to take the PCAT so long as my GPA was good enough the first 2 years. And then, like always, I had rotations after my 3rd year, after my 4th year, my APPEs in my 6th year. So during my freshman year, I was a pharmacy technician at CVS, probably like a lot of you here. And when I was there, I had some experience within an independent pharmacy as well. And after having gained both of those, I didn't really see myself in retail long term. So I kind of knew I wanted to look for something else. And this was freshman, sophomore year, so super early on. So my only goal was to, have a side job kind of in science and something that would be more challenging. That's kind of what I was missing, I think, in the technician job. So that search landed me as a research intern and a research assistant at many different research labs within Dana-Farber Cancer Institute and Boston Children's Hospital. And that was definitely different. You probably haven't heard of PharmDs doing research. And it's because it's not kind of the general path. That's usually for postdoctorates, MDs, PhDs, that track of science. But it was, in hindsight, probably one of the best things that I could have done for myself. And what I want you guys to take from that is just kind of like, it doesn't have to be, the right fit in terms of experience. You can always mold your story in a way to make it fit. I was just looking for something challenging. And again, it really didn't have to do with pharmacy other than it was preclinical research lab work. So anyway, I spent 3 to 4 years there during the summers and during the school year. And when I found out about IPhO, the pharma industry, all of that, I was like, I got to get experience. So I applied for internships. I didn't get one the first year. I applied again. And the second year, I became an intern in global medical affairs in the strategic planning group at Celgene. If you guys know Celgene, it's a pharmaceutical company, which is now BMS. Then after that, of course, I loved my experience, didn't want to look back, knew this is exactly what I wanted to do. So I just wanted to maximize on my experiences. So I actually got 2 APPEs in industry. And so one of them was a medical writing intern at Vertex Pharmaceuticals, which is a small biotech in Boston that looks over cystic fibrosis mainly. And then I also got one at BGB Group, which is a medical communications CRO, again, contract research organization in Manhattan. And that was actually virtual because of COVID. So that was kind of an overview of the experiences I got. And as you can see, they're kind of all over the place, but they all landed me in this position as a regulatory writer. And when I kind of talk about it more, you can kind of see where the skills kind of came in. And I presented it like this, and I've kind of taken the fluff out because this is what I think kind of helped the most. So again, what I want you to take away from that is you don't always have to have the most experiences. And I had more than this, and I've kind of taken that away. So that's another kind of takeaway there when it's regarding your resume, your cover letter, interviewing, all of those things. The key really is to highlight what you're good at. So that's what I've done here, and that's kind of what I want your takeaway to be, not to be like, this is exactly what I have to replicate. That's not my point here at all. So let's kind of talk about what pharma, regulatory, all of that kind of stuff now. So here I kind of want to explain the idea of contract research organizations, which I've mentioned a couple times now. So if you guys aren't familiar, pharmaceutical companies, of course, have a lot of different departments, and PharmDs can really assimilate into a lot of them pretty well. So I've mentioned some here: regulatory affairs, medical affairs, clinical development, statistics and data management. IT is not for PharmD, but I've written that for a different purpose there, and then clinical operations. These are just some. There's a lot more. But what I wanted to kind of show here is within these different departments and along the process of getting this work done, at every point you can kind of outsource that work, right? Companies outsource all the time. And so within pharmaceutical companies, when they outsource to a specific company that specializes in one of these areas, those companies are called CROs, or contract research organizations. And so you'll see that CROs can be very different. You've probably heard of one of the bigger ones, IQVIA, and they all specialize in something different, which is why they're kind of not categorized under one big umbrella. So if, let's just say, regulatory affairs is hiring someone from a pharmaceutical company, they're hiring a CRO, that CRO is going to, specialize in that work. And same thing with medical affairs. There's a lot of medical communications agencies out there. The last internship I had, BGB Group, that was a medical communications CRO. So you get the idea of that's their expertise, and that's why you would hire them. And I wanted to highlight this because not only do I work at a CRO, but that's something that I don't think is talked about very often, and it still is well within the realms of the pharmaceutical industry. And I think it's a great way to not only get experience, but kind of enter that world if that's what works out for you. So I kind of wanted to expose this idea to you guys if you guys haven't heard about it before, because again, it's a place where PharmDs can work, and I don't think it's talked about enough. All right, so we're going to move on to talking about regulatory affairs now. So that's the bigger department that a regulatory writer would sit in, as in myself. So I want to highlight kind of what the role of regulatory affairs is, and then we can dive into my role specifically. So overall, regulatory affairs in a pharmaceutical company is a department that's responsible for the communication, of course, between that company and regulatory agencies. So of course, in the US, that's the FDA, Europe, EMA, etc. They're responsible for really obtaining and maintaining any approvals for any pharmaceutical products in that company. So even after approvals, there's a slew of documents, post hoc studies. It's kind of never ending until your drug is no longer on the market. So there's always maintenance documents. Regulatory is always involved. And going into the next point, they have responsibilities at every part of the drug development process. So from clinical, in vitro, you are still submitting data documents to the FDA. Once it gets into mice, once you want to put it into humans and start clinical trials, INDs, NDAs, all of those documents, again, are regulatory documents, and that all comes under the umbrella of regulatory affairs. You're also giving the company advice on legal and scientific restraints and requirements. So saying, look, hey, the FDA needs this, and everything needs to kind of surround that ask. So giving the company that kind of guidance. Every department in the pharmaceutical industry really does this, collecting, collating, evaluating data. That's the bread and the butter of the industry. But I think every department really does it in a different way. So in regulatory, you really have to look at it in terms of, again, with that regulatory lens of what is passable, what is not passable by the FDA. And that's kind of the most general way I can put it. And then not only are we looking into those specific documents, but regulatory can span a lot of different things, including advertising of the medication, promotion of the medication, and labeling of the medication. So the package insert and the label that goes on the actual product is, again, all goes through regulatory. So you can imagine why, of course, everything has to kind of be run by the FDA, and you see regulatory in a company as kind of those experts. So now that we've kind of had an overview of regulatory, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about medical writing. So, okay. So this is kind of the basis of my role, and you'll see how I put those two together. But medical writing in and of itself is honestly its own career, and again, something that I don't think is talked about very often. It's definitely identified as a key skill in the industry, and it's highly sought after. It's just a job that is very flexible. A lot of people want that, and medical writing is always going to be in demand. There are many different types of medical writing, and you can be an expert within each of the different types. So like I mentioned, all those different CROs do something different, and at each part of the process, the writing looks different. And being an expert in kind of one of those areas can really serve you well. So whether it's on the medical affairs side, regulatory side, again, those are just two examples, but there's a whole list of different types of medical writing that you could really get into. Why is it a skill that people are looking for? It's because you're infusing both the writing and the science, right? You're taking the science and then you're asking, okay, who is this going to? And based on that, you're going to write it in some type of way. And that's creative work. So that's putting in, that creative side into the science. And again, it's just knowing how to present things. So if you're talking to a patient, if you're talking to a doctor, if you're talking to a pharmacist, you're going to be saying different things. So just knowing how to do that. And if you know how to do that, a lot of people don't. And if you have the skill, again, as a PharmD, you're kind of trained to have those skills. So it can really, again, be really beneficial if you kind of go into that realm with a PharmD. With medical writing, you kind of choose what part of the process you want to be on. And again, it's a whole career in and of itself. You can be on the preclinical side. You can decide that you only want to work on kind of advertising type of medical writing. You could only do scientific, very, manuscripts, abstracts, paperwork, that kind of stuff. So again, you can kind of decide what you want to do. And I think that serves for never kind of being bored of it. I kind of talked about this, but you really need it at every step. At every step, you need that approval from the FDA or documents that are going to some agency. So you need regulatory and medical writing at every step. And again, just saying that it is in high demand, and so it has good job outlook, and I think it serves for good job flexibility. So a lot of people who are, I mean, now we're all virtual, but later when we won't be, and before when we weren't, this is a role that kind of you can do from anywhere to begin with. So now that we've talked about the two, let's put them together. So regulatory writing, overall, you're developing the preclinical and clinical research procedures, documents, submission packets, anything, again, that would go to the FDA that's required for any study conduct, practices, any type of results, data, etc. You're ensuring that the clarity of, again, the study stats analyses, protocol guidelines, talks reporting, those are just some examples of kind of the clinical work that really goes into the writing and where you're infusing the data with the writing. You can kind of see regulatory writing as a specialty within medical writing. A lot of companies haven't actually formed this distinction. A lot of places, medical writers do regulatory writing, but that's not highlighted. A lot of places, vice versa. So I do both in my job. I would say 30 to 40% is medical writing. The rest is regulatory writing, working on these regulatory documents. So it can kind of be both. You kind of have to just see how it's structured at different places. But again, this is kind of a distinction that hasn't been made industry-wide yet. You, as a regulatory writer, you're really the expert in presenting the regulatory guidelines and strategies within regulatory documents. So it's not only about, okay, can you take the data and write this? It's more about, okay, but the FDA, that the FDA is looking for X, Y, Z, and that will give you a better chance of getting the response from the FDA that you want. So strategically, you want to set it up that way. So again, knowing that as a writer and being able to form it like that is really what you're an expert in. Again, calls for knowledge in both the writing and the science, mixing the two. And I think that this specialty in and of itself has overall really good job prospects and kind of in terms of the next step. So you can kind of take it and go wherever if you are a general medical writer and don't touch regulatory. And let's just say you wanted to go into regulatory, that jump might be harder. As a regulatory writer, you can kind of market yourself afterwards into the regulatory or into medical affairs or into clinical development, kind of into any pocket. So I think that this expertise kind of lends itself for a little more edge. So that's kind of an overview of my exact role. And I can go into details with questions, but again, I hope we have time for questions. What time is it? All right. So let's now go into the value of a PharmD within the pharmaceutical industry. I think that people talk about this a lot, but it's never as deep as to why. It's kind of like, yes, PharmDs have a value, but why do we have that value? I would say that the first thing is hands-on clinical expertise. Regardless of where you go to school, you have to do your IPs and your APPs. So no matter what, even if you don't try to get outside experience, you are supposed to get some hands-on clinical experience. So you're trained to have that experience, and that's very useful, and that's why MDs in comparison are also really valuable in the pharmaceutical industry, because when you can take that information from the clinic and you can bring it into the industry and you have that real world experience alongside your education and then alongside any other expertise you may have, and then years later, if you're in the industry, then you have both the clinical and the industry side. You can put both together. And when you're having discussions that are, let's just say we're in a meeting talking about writing a protocol, you can bring that expertise in. You can say, but hey, in the clinic, this is what really happens. Like, that's not as realistic, and being able to bring that perspective in is really, really helpful. And again, I think why doctors are also valued really highly, and we have that same training in terms of the hands-on clinical training. The second is the knowledge that we gain in pharmacy school in regards to the technical stuff. So the pharmacokinetics, pharmacology, drug interactions, drug side effects, overall treatment. That is exactly what drug companies are doing. So why wouldn't they hire drug experts to do it, right? Like that's exactly what we're made for. And a PharmD is trained for a lot more than either just clinical practice or retail practice. So I think that within the industry, all that I'm even working on is clinical documents, protocols, and all of these things. And so you constantly have to check on the things that you learned in pharmacy school. And do I know it off the top of my head? No. But do I know how to analyze it? Yes, because I was taught that. So that edge is really, really important. The next is understanding how to communicate with both patients and healthcare professionals. Again, even if you were as a student to not do any external things, you would still have IPs and APIs. And there you're naturally learning how to interact with different types of people. And why that's important is because you're going to communicate something that's scientific and medical very differently to a patient than you will to a doctor. And again, that's exactly the skill that they're looking for in the industry, because things are geared towards one thing. You need to know how to be able to communicate that data to certain people. So we're kind of, again, trained to do this. We're trained to use different things. I remember even doing this in lab, correct? So like this kind of comes up, and again, by training, we're really good at this. So I think it really brings value for a PharmD. The next two are, of course, our diverse knowledge, and doctors and PhDs have this too, but we didn't do a dissertation for many years on just one little tiny topic. Instead, we've learned about all of these different therapeutic areas, and we might not be well versed in one very, very deeply, but having that broad knowledge kind of allows you to go anywhere in terms of the science and allows you to bring that with it. So that critical clinical thinking is really important. And then, of course, all of our lectures are didactic clinical preparation for that. So again, we're just really well suited to be in the industry. All right, so let's quickly touch upon fellowships and entry-level positions. So, of course, highly controversial. And I think it's a good question to ask. When I had my first internship, I asked this to every single person, even if they weren't a PharmD. I was like, you probably interact with people who are fellows. Thoughts on this? Because I was kind of always both ways. And for those who don't know, I did go to mid-year. I did apply for fellowships. I got one, and I actually denied it because it just didn't, different topic, but it just wasn't the right fit. And then went on to search for entry-level positions. So that's kind of my background on it. But let's talk about the pros first. So fellowships, why are they good, and what are kind of their plus points? The first thing is definitely, it's only 1 to 2 years, and you're getting really high impact training. And that's the whole point. It's for your training. And so that really does amount to that 3 to 5 years of experience, as long as you kind of take up that whole experience, do as much as you can, are involved in those, are actually absorbing. I do think that it can lend to many, many years of experience. And not only that, in a fellowship, you're guaranteed mentorship. And I think that is something that's not highlighted enough. Even in my role currently, there are, as someone who's so new to the industry, you need mentorship so much more than anyone else. And even then, you should never lose that. Your manager should always be your mentor. And so in a fellowship, you're guaranteed that. That is the whole point. It's a training program to make you well suited for this industry. So they're going to give you all the resources, and your manager knows that. In a job, you might not have that guaranteed. So that's the only difference. Again, in a fellowship, if you're not being given that mentorship, you can easily call that out and be like, look, this is exactly the point of this program, correct? But not so much in the job force. In the job force, you have to do your job first, and then that comes second. And sometimes, again, it just depends on where you land. The next pro for fellowships is exposure to high profile projects. So again, you're there for a purpose. They know that they need to train you, so they will try their best to give you the most high profile, high impact projects on the most happening things in the company. When you're in a job, that's not necessarily going to be the case. No one is necessarily looking out for your development in that way. And again, you're there to do a role and not do, I guess, much outside of that. So if you're in a place where your role isn't on a high impact project, there's probably not going to be or there's going to be less room to move into that than if you were a fellow and you were like, hey, you know, look, that looks interesting. Can I do that? 9 times out of 10, you'll get a yes. So that's, again, the point of the program. I think fellowships put you in the right place. I think you're guaranteed, again, being surrounded by, you know, an environment that you want to succeed in and by people who know how to get there. So you're in an environment that's very conducive to success in what you want to do. So if you want to put yourself in a place where, again, you get that kind of environment and you're guaranteed that. And why I'm saying that guaranteed portion is because you are, again, it's part of the program. And in a pharma company, people are generally really looking to help each other grow. When you're in an entry-level position, you might not find that that's as much the case because, again, you're not in a position where that's the point of it. A lot of factors can go into that. But I think really, if you want to set yourself up to definitely be in an environment that is conducive to that kind of success, then I think fellowship is definitely right. And I think that this is, again, controversial, but it could assist in obtaining that, you know, promotion to after fellowship, definitely getting a manager position. Again, it's a topic that's always talked about. Is that guaranteed? No. Are there people who have gone through fellowships and not gotten a position after and not gotten a manager position after? Yes. But does it help your case? I mean, better than not having anything, right? So again, depends on how you look at it. Now for entry level, the pros are, the first is, of course, average initially, you're going to get paid more. For fellowships, you're going to get paid 45, 50,000. That's flat, that's standard. But that's at the beginning. So this is just for the first 2 years or the first year if you were to do a 1-year fellowship. After that, I think it pretty much evens out. The next pro is that when you're in a job, again, you're an employee, you're not necessarily in a training program. And even though you're not seen as a student in fellowships, but again, you're still in a program. So if that's something that you want to kind of completely go into the adult world and the professional world and be in a job, then here you're an employee and not in that training program. So that can kind of lend itself to other opportunities that you might not get as a fellow. I think initially one of those opportunities is having more ownership. I think as a fellow, you're going to be tagged onto projects. You might not own a lot of things, but depending on, again, where you are in terms of company and job, you can, I think, own a lot more if you're in an entry-level position versus a fellowship. And I think lastly, an entry-level job can open doors you didn't know existed. I think there's a lot more that PharmDs kind of constrict themselves to, and you don't have to do that. We can be in roles that a PharmD has never been in before. There's a lot of roles that just need scientific backgrounds, and if you find it interesting, there's no reason that you couldn't go down that pathway. So I think just being in a job versus a fellowship kind of takes that PharmD out of it and puts you as a PharmD in groups of people that have other backgrounds, even more so than maybe fellowships, because I think, again, fellowships are surrounded and in companies where PharmDs are known. So I think those are some differences, but overall, I think honestly, both of them can have the same outcome, and it just depends on what you make of it. You have to keep networking, you have to keep talking, you have to do a great job wherever you are. So at the end of the day, it's just what you make of it. If you get a fellowship and you don't work for the 2 years that you're there, it's not going to amount to anything. So I think at the end of the day, again, it's very equivalent, and I can say that for a fact because I denied one for the other. So I definitely think that either way you go, you're going to set yourself up for success. So that was a kind of a quick overview. I think we have about 9-ish minutes. I hope I didn't take too much time, but I hope that was in-depth enough that you guys got a good idea of what I was trying to say and what I do. So I definitely want to just open it up, go for it, ask your questions, and we can do this really casually. You can just start talking if you have a question.
I have a question. Thank you so much for being here today. My question is, I noticed on the first slide that you are also getting a second degree. If you don't mind speaking to the benefit of getting, as pharmacists, getting a dual degree.
Sure. Great question. So I will be honest in saying that MCPHS provides master's degrees after you complete a doctorate at their campus. So some of those options are master's in regulatory affairs, public health, master's of public health, MBA in healthcare management, and then a couple of others. So out of those, I chose MBA. I think a dual degree can be helpful if you know what you want to do with it, if that makes sense. I don't think it's helpful in every case. And you have to think about what value it'll add. Why I did the MBA versus anything else is just because within the industry, again, at the end of the day, it's a business. So I don't think necessarily having that MBA will help me considerably. Will it hurt me? Probably not. So that's kind of how I looked at it. Now, if I know there's discussions, of course, like about MPH, other master's programs. Again, I think it can help if you wanted to go into policy with your PharmD, which you 100% could, then the MPH would make sense for you. And that would probably help you there. So if it makes sense, then I think it definitely is something you should do. If it doesn't, don't bother, because I think that a PharmD speaks for itself. And honestly, an MBA is not, if I didn't have it, I wouldn't be upset about it. Your PharmD can take you very far. So hopefully that gave you some insight. But kind of, again, at the end of the day, every situation is different. So assess your own situation and really know why you're doing it, not just because you want to get 2 degrees.
Thank you.
So you talked about like the benefit of having writing experience and also becoming a medical writer or regulatory writer. And what are ways in pharmacy school we can sort of prepare ourselves to have those types of skills?
Yeah, I think you do have to seek them out. At least at my campus, I didn't feel like I found a lot of external support. But again, I think it's just how you maneuver around things. So if you have research opportunities with professors on campus, maybe making sure that a manuscript is involved, and that should be pretty easy. That's something that if you spend X amount of time, you can definitely get a paper out of it. So just having that conversation and keeping that as a goal, I think that's one example. Posters anywhere also count. You can also actually get jobs while you're in pharmacy school as a medical writing freelancer, etc. Again, depending on your other skills, but you can argue, I guess that story would be, I'm a pharmacy student. I would assume that you have some retail experience or some hospital clinical experience. So use that to be like, here's why I'm medically sound. I'm also in pharmacy school working towards XYZ. There's a lot of roles out there that you can do that. And I'm actually currently a medical writing freelancer, and I didn't do it during school, but I wish I did. So that's another way to do it. I would say publications and manuscripts are probably the best way. And then, of course, internships. If you are able to land one in the pharmaceutical industry, then you'll find many opportunities there.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And people can feel free to unmute themselves or drop a question in the chat.
And if you guys have any questions after this, feel free to email me. So you can feel free to share my email for any follow-up questions. I'd be happy to answer you.
I actually did have another question. So I think you shared somewhere that like you had a little bit of trouble finding a job right after the pandemic, but then you were like blessed with this opportunity. And I was just wondering, we hear a lot about making connections in school and everything. And how were some ways that you made connections while you were in school?
Yeah, I feel like I learned that too late. Networking really is great. And I think that you're honestly going to have to do it regardless. So you might as well start earlier. It's a word you're never going to stop hearing. And I think the best way during a pandemic or not is definitely LinkedIn. You can kind of get in touch with whoever you want on LinkedIn. It's such a huge resource. So really getting in touch with people that you think are working in something interesting that you might see yourself in, or if you just want to see what they do, or if just reach out. There's never any harm in reaching out, and it's probably better now because everyone knows everyone's stuck at home for quarantine. So if they're not responding, you know that they're just ignoring you. So like I think LinkedIn is such a huge opportunity, and it's something that I haven't even really maximized upon. So LinkedIn is probably my best suggestion in terms of networking. But moreover, I think the key there is don't think about quantity. If you can make connections with people and get on Zoom with them and connect with 2 or 3 of them and just consistently keep them updated, and they know what you're interested in, what you want to do. You share your kind of milestones with them. Even 2 or 3 people can make a huge difference, and they have a network. So maybe not always focus on quantity, but also the quality of those relationships, and actually making sure you don't always just go to people when you need someone. Actually creating those relationships, I think, is the more important part there.
That was really helpful. Thank you. Are there any other last questions? If not, we can conclude the meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. And of course, like always, feel free to reach out with any questions.
Thank you so much for attending our meeting and joining us. I hope you have a wonderful evening, everyone.
And that's a wrap. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that presentation was helpful for any of you out there who needed that information. For the students who attended the presentation, thank you so much. And last but not least, thank you so much to the UNC School of Pharmacy IPhO chapter for inviting me to give this presentation. If you guys have any follow-up questions, as always, feel free to reach out to me via email, DMs, or the comments below. If you guys liked this video and thought it was helpful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe while you're at it. It really helps YouTube understand that this is a video that's helpful, and it'll help push that video out to other people. So if you guys think this content is worth that, please go ahead and take the 1 second to give it that thumbs up. And as always, if you guys like the hoodie that I'm wearing, I have this and many other designs in many other colors, sizes, and variations on the FocusRx website. The link is down in the description bar below, so be sure to check it out. That is it for today's video, and you guys will, of course, see me in the next one.